Let's see here. Let me get the screen going here. Hey everyone! And yeah, no, Demerg's no problem with that, buddy. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Let's Read Resident Evil City of the Dead. I'm your host, Remy McNeil, although I think most people watching this live already know that. For anyone just now joining in, there are several videos like this that are down below. They should be able to find them. They should either be in the related feed, or you can just look at my backlog and my videos. But yes, today we should be finishing this novel. It's been a fun ride, and I've had a lot of fun reading to you guys. There's actually questions right there about what the next book I'll be reading live, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Well, actually, at the end of this, hopefully. Someone please remind me at the end of the stream. I'll bring that up. But for now, I would like to just jump right into this, because last time my voice was getting really tired, and so I would like to just not have my voice get super tired and just get right on to things. So let's see. Last time we were doing this, I believe we had a number of different things happen. Let's see. That's right. Leon was confronted by Annette Birkin, who basically outed Ada as a spy. Fun stuff. So we're going to see the repercussions of all that. Am I coming through clearly for you guys? Are you hearing me just fine? Just want to make sure that I have everything going just fine. Oh, why is my... Oh, hi, Ash. How's it going? Let's listen. There we go. No, you're right on time. I just started the stream. Wunderbar, wunderbar. Dishonored has a novel series? I may have to look into that. And yes, Alistair, hello. Alright, so let's just jump right into it, shall we? Chapter 27. The cool, dark ride down through the elevator shaft ended in a squealy of hydraulic brakes, and then silence as the engine shut down and trapped them somewhere in the seemingly endless tunnel. Claire? What? Claire held a finger to her lips, hushing Sherry, and heard the sound of what, like an alarm from somewhere outside, a repeating, muffled bleat of honking noise. There seemed to be talking, too, but Claire could only make out the faintest mumble. Come on, sweetie. I think the ride's over. Let's see where we ended up, okay? And stay close. They moved out of the transport room and onto the platform. The distance sounds not so distant anymore. And there was light coming from somewhere behind the lift. Claire took Sherry's hand as they Claire took Sherry's hand as they walked quickly around, not wanting to worry the girl, but feeling pretty sure that it was an alarm they were hearing. There was definitely someone speaking over the rhythmic squeals too, and Claire wanted to know what they were saying. The lift had stopped only a few feet down from some kind of service tunnel, and the light she'd seen coming from a caged bulb that hung down from the tunnel ceiling. There wasn't a door, but there was a decent-sized crawl space at the end of the short passage, and it would have to do. It's either that or climb back up to the surface, probably only a mile or so. Not a chance. Claire boosted Sherry up and then climbed after her, moving to the front and then crouch-walking to the dark hole. The bleeding sound got louder the closer she got to the crawl space. The mumble transformed into a woman's voice. She strained to hear the words, hoping that she'd catch elevator malfunction and temporary, but still couldn't quite make it out. They'd have to abandon the lift and hope they were leaving it for something better. Claire circled around, sighing. Looks like crawl time for me and thee, kiddo. I'll go first, and then... SLAM! Sherry shrieked as something landed on the roof of the transport behind them, crashing through the top in a thundering clap of rending metal. Claire grabbed her, pulling her close, her breath caught in her throat. And a hand, 2 hands, appeared through the hole in the roof, 2 thick arms clad in shadow, and the gleaming white of Mr. X's enormous skull rose from the destroyed lift, like a dead moon on a starless night. Claire turned and pushed Sherry towards the darkness of the crawlspace, her heart hammering, her body suddenly sick with sweat. Go! Go! I'm right behind you! Sherry disappeared into the curving black, darting out of sight like a frightened mouse, and Claire didn't look back, was too scared shitless to look back as she followed Sherry into the hole, the relentless stalker surely climbing through the shattered elevator to continue his... Not sure why that happened. She'd forced herself not to rush to Leon's aid, promising herself that if she heard shots, she'd reconsider. But then the laboratory facility had been violently shaken, and the bland voice of the recording started its loop. Shit! Ada staggered to her feet, furious at the woman scientist, a part of her aching for Leon, knowing what this meant. And it had triggered the failsafe, which meant they probably had less than 10 minutes to get the hell out of Dodge. And Leon doesn't know the way. No, not important. If she was going to collect the sample, which Annette surely had on her, she needed to do it now. Leon wasn't her problem. He'd never been her problem, and she couldn't quit now, not after the hell she'd gone through to get Trent's precious virus. Ada took a single step away from the main fuse panel that connected the 3 catwalks, and heard the pounding footsteps coming towards her, footsteps too heavy to be Annette's. She slid back into the shadows and around to the span that led west, pressing herself against the hub frame. Oh, sup, Yoguk? Derek can give you out free ice cream, you lucky bastard. Share some with the class, shall ya? A second later, Leon went running past, probably back to where he thought she'd be waiting for him. Ada took a deep breath, blowing it out as she swept Leon from her mind and hurried across the southern bridge to find Annette. Ada was gone. Has been activated. This auto-destruct sequence... Shut up! Shut up! Leon hissed, standing helplessly in the middle of the room. His stomach knotted and his hands balled into fists. When she heard the alarm, she must have panicked and run. She was probably stumbling through the giant facility, lost in daze, maybe looking for him as that infernally calm voice repeated the sirens blaring and rang. The transport lift. Leon turned and ran back through the door, and saw that it was gone, a large empty hole a few feet deep where it had been. He'd been too intense on getting to Ada. He hadn't even noticed that it wasn't there anymore. We have to find that tunnel. We have to. Without the lift, we're trapped. With a silent howl of frustration, Leon turned and ran back towards the catwalks, praying that he would find her before it was too late. The crawlspace ended abruptly, stopping over at least 7-foot drop into an empty tunnel. Her ears ringing, her mouth dry as dust, Sherry grabbed the edges of the square hole, closed her eyes, and jumped. She swung out over the hall and letting go as soon as she was straight up and down, landing crooked and falling as her right leg crumpled. It hurt, but she hardly felt it, scrambling on hands and knees to get out of the way, staring up at the hole. And there was Claire, her head coming out, her wide, worried eyes taking in that she was okay, that the hall was empty and safe. Except that there were bells ringing and a woman on the intercom was talking, and Mr. X was coming. Claire stretched her arm down as far as she could with the gun. Sherry, I need you to hold this. I can't turn around. Sherry stood and reached up, grabbing the barrel, amazed at how heavy the gun was as Claire let go. Sherry is an amazing character. I love her. Don't point at anything, Claire breathed, and then was actually dove out of the hole, curling her body and landing on her shoulder, her head tucked in tight. She did a half somersault and then her legs banged into the concrete wall. Before Sherry could even ask if she was alright, Claire was on her feet, taking the gun and pointing it at the door at the end of the hall. Run! She said, and she started to run herself, one hand pushing on Sherry's back as they sprinted for the door, as the intercom voice told them they had to get out, told them that the self-destruct sequence had been activated, and behind them, a sound of crashing metal tore through the blaring noise of the sirens, and Sherry ran faster, terrified. And look at that. Already on to the next chapter. Not even 15 minutes in. We're making good time, folks. No, I've never played the Devil May Cry games. I actually have Devil May Cry number 4 on Steam, but I've never gotten into it. I just never had the time. 28. Annette Birkin crawled out from beneath the crushing weight of the cold metal, still holding the gun, the G-Virus gone. As she opened her mouth to scream her fury, to rail at the gods at the injustice of her terrible plight, blood dribbled out across her lips in a thick stream of clotted drool. Mine, mine, mine. Somehow, she made it to her feet. Ada told herself that she didn't deserve Leon Kennedy's good opinion anyway. She never deserved it. Forgive me. As he ran back across the catwalk from the transport bay area and swung west, running blind with fear for her, she stepped out of the hub shadows and pointed the Beretta at his back. Leon! He spun around and Ada felt her throat lock at the relief that spread across his face, and struggled not to feel anything more as the joy turned sour, his grin fading. Oh, Jesus, forgive me. I've been waiting for you, she said, and felt no pride in how smooth and steady her voice sounded. How very cold. Yes, Sherry does show up in Resident Evil 6, which, as far as I'm concerned, is non-canon, because Resident Evil 6 is terrible. As a Resident Evil game. It's an alright game overall. The alarms blared, the mechanical voice almost as icy as hers, telling them that the failsafe couldn't be shut down. She didn't have time to let him get used to the idea that she was as much as a monster as the Birkin thing or one of the soulless zombies. The G-Virus, she said. Give it to me. Leon didn't move. She was telling the truth, he said. No anger, but more pain than Ada would have wanted to hear. You work for Umbrella. Ada shook her head. No. Who I work for is no concern of yours. For the first time in years since she's been very young, Ada felt a string of tears. Felt the sting of tears, and suddenly she hated him for that, for making her hate herself. I tried, she wailed, her composure blown by the fierce torrent of anger that caroused through her. I tried to leave you, back in the factory, and you had to take it from Birkin, didn't you? You couldn't just leave it alone. She saw pity on his face, and felt the fury pass, swept away in a wave of sorrow, for what she lost with him, for the part of herself she lost a long, long time ago. She wanted to tell him about Trent, about the missions in Europe and Japan, about how she become what she was, about every event in her miserable, successful life that had brought her to this place, holding a weapon on a man who'd saved her, a man she might have cared about in a different time and place. The clock was ticking. Hand it over, she said. Don't make me kill you. Leon stared her into her eyes and said simply, no. A second gone, and then another. Ada lowered the Beretta. Let's see what the fourth Snake's wasted potential video starring Jill Valentine. Yeah, I didn't see that one. I always argue that Jill should have been in Resident Evil Revelations 2, which would explain why she's not present in Resident Evil 6. No, Resident Evil 6 is very interesting in its evolution to an action game. Yeah, don't hold your breath for an RE6 reboot. I don't see them going beyond Resident Evil Code Veronica for remakes. Even Code Veronica, I think, would be iffy. Resident Evil 3 might be the last remake we get for a long while. Leon steeled himself for the shot, for the bullet from Ada's gun that would kill him. And she slowly lowered the weapon, her shoulders sagging, a tear running down one porcelain cheek. Leon blew out his held breath, feeling too many things, a jumble of sadness and betrayal, and pity for the tortured struggle in her beautiful dark gaze. And a shot rang out from the shadows behind her. Ada's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open as she pitched forward, the gun hitting the floor, her body hitting the rail and flipping over. Ada, no! He ran and dove, and somehow she caught the rail as he grabbed her wrist, her body dangling over the bottomless dark, blood sprouting from her hanging, shattered shoulder. "Ada, hold on!" "Mine," Annette whispered. She raised the handgun again, intending to shoot the other, to take back what was hers, to make them all pay. And the gun was too heavy. It was falling, and she was falling with it. Together they fell into the dark metal. The dark spinning up to her mind and finally taking her pain away. "William." It was her very last thought before she went to sleep. The door opened into a room filled with screaming machines, the howls and hisses of the humming, rattling giants drowning out in the shrill of the alarm warning. Claire ran, pulling and pushing Sherry along, looking desperately for a way out, knowing that the monster was close. What does he want? Why us? There was a platform in the corner, some 6 feet off the floor. A stack of crates pushed to one side just beneath it. "This way!" Claire screamed, and they ran past the row of shuddering metal consoles. Heat pouring from the machines as Claire pushed Sherry up and then climbed after her. Crash! She turned and saw the massive creature was ripping through the door across the room, straight into the screaming heat and searching. At the end of the platform, a double metal hatch. They dashed for it. Claire, not thinking of anything but how to get away, how to destroy a thing that had survived all that it had. The door was unlocked, and they ran into another platform. The heat in the shadowy chamber was searing, terrible, and a dead end. Claire saw that before they had taken a half-dozen running strides into the massive room. They were on the overseer's platform in a foundry, the boiling heat rising up from the heavy smelting vats below. She had 12 bullets split into 2 guns, and I completely forgot to loop that music. Because it's like more loud than my natural voice. Every game pre-RE4 possible. I would actually like a remake of Resident Evil Survivor. I would love to see what they could do with that now that the first-person mechanics have been fine-tuned. Especially that those stories are somewhat interesting, but could do some serious revision. Okay, so she had 12 bullets split between 2 guns. Claire stumbled to the edge of the platform, Sherry next to it, the electric orange of molten metal bathing over them in its fevered glow, hot enough to burn anything. How? How do I make him jump? Sherry, get over here! Sherry, get over there! She pointed to the farthest corner of the platform, and Sherry shook her head, her small face trembling with fear. Do it! Now! Claire shouted, and with a cry of terror, Sherry ran, her locket banging against the open flaps of her denim vest. Not a locket. And Sherry screamed, and Claire turned, and Mr. X was coming. He walked into the chamber, as stiff and huge and impossible as when she'd first seen him, the eerie orange light turning him into even more of a nightmare. Claire stood her ground, jamming Iron's gun into her shorts, the half-formed plan running through her frightened mind. It probably wouldn't work, but she had to try. He reaches for me, I jump over the railing, I grab on, he falls. Mr. X turned his blank gaze towards her as he took his floor-shaking, measured steps, the black bullet holes in his face and throat, just pockets of shadow in the smooth, terrible pumpkin light. And he turned towards Sherry, and raised his fists, and started for her. Hey! Hey! I'm here! Claire screamed, and he didn't hear her, didn't see her. His entire monstrous being focused on this cowering, sobbing girl huddled against the far wall, clutching her locket. And Claire knew what he wanted. The half-remembered phrases from both Sherry and Annette came together in a flash of awareness, forming the answer. J-Virus, rip her apart. Good luck charm, not a locket. Sherry! He wants the necklace! Throw it to me! If she was wrong, they were both dead. Mr. X closed in on the girl, blocking her from Claire's view, and the pendant, the G-Virus pendant that Annette Birkin had inflicted on her young daughter, came flying through the heated dark, hitting the floor in front of Claire's feet. Mr. X reeled around, following the path of the throned pendant, with his black eyes, forgetting Sherry the second the necklace left her grasp. It was true. Good girl! Claire scooped it up, waving it at the monster, feeling a rush of incredible anger and malicious glee as the bloated giant started towards her with unwavering intent. Fists raised again, his lifeless features fixed on the glittering pendant. "You want this?" Claire taunted, the words spilling out in fury, for the wasted bullets, for the fear that she and Sherry had suffered. "Yeah? Then come and get it, you miserable, mindless freak!" The monster was less than 5 feet away when Claire turned and threw it into the bubbling, burning hot pool, the necklace disappearing into the melted iron. And the Superman creature that had terrorized them throughout the endless nights walked straight into the rail, the metal bar snapping in all his powerful wake, and plunged, silently, into the giant vat, a great wave of sizzling metal sloshing over this blackened sides, spontaneous eruptions of flame dancing up from the dark shapes of his body as he disappeared beneath the surface of the molten lake. Triumph, sweet and wonderful, and then the cool voice of the recording changed suddenly, wiping away the joy of seeing Mr. X take a lava bath. Over the shrill blast of the mechanical sirens. "There are 5 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. All remaining personnel should evacuate immediately. Please report to the bottom platform. Repeat, please report to the bottom platform. Repeat." Fuck, I am not subjecting myself to more fate than I have to, my friend. I think that Chris should have had, like, more shit going down in Resident Evil 5. Like, 5 and 6 were, like, some of the biggest missed opportunities in the entire series. Sherry was by her side, and Claire grabbed her hand, and they ran. I'm gonna address things now, because I'm here like this. Why is my chat not showing up? What the where is it? It's not showing up on this one for some reason. That's not like it. So let's see what we have here. Bone Man, I think they should focus on more RE games like RE8 and 9. Honestly, I kind of like the dual approach of do a remake, do a new game. Do a remake, do a new game. I would totally be down for that kind of system going down. Because it gives them breathing time to really innovate on the old games and innovate for the new games. It really gives them time to actually think of it, while also having a base to build from for one of the projects, so they don't have to waste so much time rebuilding shit. So I think what they did with Resident Evil 2 was fantastic, and I would love more of it. With Resident Evil 3, Code Veronica, and Survivor. Though again, my biggest ask is Resident Evil Outbreak. I will not stop asking for that because I think it would do fantastic in this new day and age. Based on a movie where Shaggy was getting mocked off a group of bikers. Oh yeah, I saw that. The Shaggy memes. All right, let's continue them. The pain was incredible, and Ada closed her eyes, wondering if she would die from it. Ada, hang on! Just hang on, I'll pull you up! Through the throbbing, pounding sirens that assaulted her ears, Ada heard the countdown from for the fail-safe start to run. 5 minutes. He tries to save me. We both die. Leon's grip was strong, the determination in his panicked, pleading voice almost as strong as her own will. Almost, but not quite. Ada turned her face up to his, and saw that in spite of it all, he still wanted her to survive. He wanted to help her up and carry her away to safety, to the safety of escape. Not this time. Not for me. Her life had been about selfishness, about ego and greed. She'd seen a lot of good people die, and somewhere along the way, she lost the ability to care, telling herself that even the effort was a waste of time and a sign of weakness. And I was wrong. I was selfish and wrong, and now it's too late. Not too late. Whatever waited beneath her, the decision was made. Leon, go down west and find the cargo room, past the row of plastic chairs. You need the disc, it's in my pouch. Ada, I have it! Cargo disc, right? I have it. I found it. Don't talk, just hold on, let me help you up. He fumbled at the rail, trying to maintain his grip. Talking was a horrible effort, but she had to finish what she had to tell him before time ran out. The code is 345. Get to the elevator, Leon. Take it down. The subway. Tunnel leads out. Have to run full throttle and watch out for Birkin, the G carrier. He's changed by now. Got it? Leon nodded, his blazing blue eyes filling her up. Live, she said, and it was good. It was a good word, a word to go out on. She was tired, and the mission was wrapped, and Leon would live. She let go of the railing, and Leon screamed her name, and the sound of it followed her down into the dark like a bittersweet goodbye. Chapter 29. Sherry was scared, but Mr. X was dead, and he must have been the monster all along. Not the one at the station, but the real monster, the one that had wanted to rip her apart all along. But she didn't have time to think about it, as Claire sprinted, jerking her along back the way they'd come, through the machine room, through the hall, with the crawl space, and around the corner, and Sherry screamed as a zombie reeled towards them. A dead white creature made of dusty bone, and Claire raised her gun and shot. Bang! And the dry white head caved in. The moaning dead creature crumpled to the floor, and then Claire was dragging her over the body and running for the door at the end of the hall. It was an elevator, and Sherry collapsed against one wall after Claire pulled her inside, trying to catch her breath as Claire punched the console controls. After the speed of their run from Mr. X, the elevator's descent was a crawl, a soft humming crawl. There's the ending here is not that long. We're gonna make it, Claire gasped. Just a little longer. Sherry nodded, her heart pounding even harder as the intercom voice told them they had 4 minutes left to be safe. Leon felt like he didn't know how to stand up and walk away. The image of her composed, beautiful face in the seconds before she let go. She's gone. Ada's dead. He reached for the Beretta, fresh grief washing over him as he picked it up, the weapon still warm from her touch. And it was too light by half because it wasn't loaded. There wasn't even a clip. Magazine. She'd never meant to hurt him. She'd lied all along, but she never meant to hurt him at all. Our 4 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. All remaining personnel should evacuate immediately. Please report to the bottom platform. 4 minutes. He had 4 minutes to get far enough away to fulfill Ada's last request. He stood up and turned for the door, and stopped, reaching into his pocket, pulling out the tiny glass tube full of purple fluid. He knew he didn't have time to spare, but it only took a second to pull his arm back and throw the sample as hard as he could, wanting to be far away from it as possible. The laboratory responsible for so much death was going to burn. Let the G-virus burn with it. Actually, that's interesting. Resident Evil Survivor 4, Dead Aim, actually covers that, sort of. I'll get to that. I can get to that in a minute if someone reminds me. About the stockholders. Yes! The elevator door opened and there was a train, a secret subway train in shining silver. It was silent and dark, not the powered-up thrumming machine that Claire had hoped to see, but it was still the most beautiful escape vehicle that she'd ever laid eyes on, hands down. Sherry holding onto her arm, they ran to the door at the front of the three-way subway car. The three-car subway, the bleeding alarm still sounding, echoing through the concrete tunnel. The woman's bland voice, the voice that Claire had started to hate long moments ago, informed them that they had 3 minutes to get to this minimum safe distance. They hurried aboard, Claire noticing and not carrying that there weren't any seats, just a wide empty space for passengers to stand in. Oh, thank you, Perry Logan, for subscribing. The control booth was to the left. Let's get this show on the road, Claire said, and the bright and radiant hopes of the Sherry's dirtied face made Claire's heart break just a little. Oh, baby. Claire looked quickly away, hopping up the steps of the control room, making a silent promise to herself that if the train didn't work, she'd carry Sherry through the tunnel herself. Whatever it took to see that fragile hope in her eyes wasn't broken. The code in the verification disk he'd found in the operating room opened the door just as Ada had said, the broached hatch opening into a short hall. With 3 minutes left, Leon dashed down the cold corridor through another over-wide door, a biohazard symbol emblazoned across the front, and found himself in the cargo room. He didn't have time to stop and get a good look. His focus on getting to the elevator before the recording told him he couldn't possibly get out of the facility alive. Leon ran to the back of the wide, strangely red-tinted room, found the controls for the large warehouse-type elevator, and slapped the button for down, ready to jump in and go. And nothing happened, except that a row of tiny lights, perhaps 20 tiny lights over the elevator door, started flashing in descending order. Slowly. Leon reached forward and slapped the button again, feeling somewhat like numb disbelief as the elevator crept down, pausing for what seemed like a minute between floors as the alarms blared and the countdown to the lab's destruction ticked closer and closer to the end. Jesus! He turned around, feeling like he'd scream if he had to wait much longer, and for the first time got a clear look at the room he was in. 2 tall, wide shelves that ran the length of the chamber held a very specific kind of cargo, and although the half-dozen giant glass containers that lined each shelf held nothing but clear red fluid, Leon felt a chill just looking at them. Each cylinder was large enough to hold a fully grown man, and it made him wonder what they had been built for. Doesn't matter. They're going to be blown to shit in a matter of minutes, and so am I if this goddamn thing doesn't hurry up! He hurried back to the elevator, almost glad to be angry, frustrated to have something else to feel besides loss, and the ceiling over the elevator started to shake and rattle. Leon backed away, pointing his magnum at the solid metal ceiling panel as it crashed down and out, and the monster from the transport lift landed in front of him, the same demonic creature that had hurt Ada, that should have killed him. Birkin? And from the way it threw back its strange head and howled, the vicious feral sound drowning out the buzz of the alarms, he could tell it had come to finish the job. The subway was ready. It was powered up and ready to go, except it seemed like the tunnel gate release had malfunctioned. A console full of green lights and a single red dot that insisted the gate needed to be opened manually. 2 minutes to a safe minimum distance. Won't make it. We'll never make it. Stay here, Claire said and went outside to find the release, praying that it was nothing. Leon turned and ran as the monster started walking towards him, each powerful stride thundering through the chamber, the echoes of its terrible shriek still spinning through the room. Think! The powerful shotgun hadn't been enough. He had to hit it someplace vulnerable. The eyes. Use the magnum. Leon was back at the door. He spun and fired, aiming the magnum at the creature's face. Except that the face was changing again, the jaw dropping and falling away as it screamed. Great jagged spikes of tooth or claw slid up from what was left of the mouth, from out of the top of its pulsating chest, and another scream burst out of its mutating throat. Leon saw 2 new arms unfurl from its sides, the limbs snapping into place, elbows locking, thick worms of taloned fingers growing from the tips. Bam! 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 The shots grouped tight, blowing into the thin stretched skin over its slitted left eye. The monster roared, this time in pain, and Leon saw shards of bone and pus-purple fluid splatter out, a small stream of dark blood obscuring the yellow ball of its eyes. How did William scream Sherry's name in Darkseid's Chronicle? I don't remember that. I've played through Darkseid's Chronicle quite a bit. It shook its head back and forth, flinging more liquid, squatting down on its haunches like a mutant frog, and leapt into the air, springing up and right, landing on one of the 7-foot-high shelves with an animal grunt. Oh shit, how'd it do that? He couldn't see its eyes, couldn't see anything but its back as it slumped down, but it was changing again. He could hear the wet snapping sounds and see the knobs of spine rising up through the purple flesh of its back. He didn't want to see what it was becoming, but the elevator hadn't landed yet, and he had 2 goddamn minutes. Leon grabbed another clip magazine and slapped it home, then fired at what he could see, a shape with 6 legs, a shape that no longer looked like anything human. The shot hit one of the muscular shoulders, and the creature jumped. Like some wild, spidering beast, it leapt back to the floor, landing a few feet in front of him. Its chest had become a wall of strange teeth, of spikes that opened and closed as it panted. And when it screamed again, the sound was a demon cry, like nothing he'd ever heard, like the dying screams of 1,000 damned souls. Leon got 2 shots off in the cluster of moving teeth and stumbled away, and beneath the constant blares of the sirens he heard the bright and cheery ping of the elevator's arrival. Claire ran to the front of the train, looking at the series of levers and switches set into the tunnel wall, frowning, finding the red and white handles in less than 10 seconds, and slamming it down. She heard the grating of metal somewhere in the front of the train, and turned to run back to the door when she heard the metal again. The ripping, tearing sound of steel being bent and hammered out of shape, coming from somewhere behind the subway, from somewhere in the back of the tunnel. No. No way. She stared towards the back of the train, past the metal bars of a closed gate that led back to the shadows, and heard the sound like bone on concrete, a grinding, heavy noise that repeated again and again. Footsteps. I love Nier Automata. Nier Automata is amazing, and the music from Drakengard is fantastic. The newer Drakengard 3. And I've read full Let's Plays of his, by Dark Id. I highly recommend his Let's Plays of the Drakengard and Nier series. They're fucking hilarious. Yeah, actually, oddly enough, he did an entire series on the Resident Evil games, too. So if you want to check out a Red Let's Play where you read through with screenshots, the Dark Id has some hilarious ones. I remember I just got enraptured by them. They are great. Highly recommend. So where was I? Yes, footsteps. Claire ran for the door, knowing that it couldn't be Mr. X. Absolutely could not. He was melted, gone, and they didn't have the G-Virus anymore, and she caught a glimpse of movement past the bars of the shadow, some 30 feet away. A glimpse of something tall, wisp of smoke curling through the darkness, and the bitter choking stench of something burned. It stepped out of the shadow, stepping towards the back of the train car, raising charred, massive fists. BAM! And the car actually rocked as Claire realized that it was Mr. X, or what was left of him, and that he was surely a demon straight from hell. She'd combined the clips on their elevator ride. 11 rounds left. There was no way it would be enough, but that was all that she had. Claire raised Iron's gun, wondering if this was the end. It was the end because you're using clips and a gun that takes magazines, Claire! Sorry. Leon ran around the shelf to his right, heading back to the elevator, and there were galloping, thundering footsteps right behind. He couldn't stop. Another turn back through the middle of the room, and he was hit in the back, propelled forward and down as the beast rammed him, hot rubbery flesh slamming him into the floor. Leon rolled and was on top of him, the dripping teeth poised to drive through his skull, its thick legs pinning him down. The tumor-like eye that was still there, opening out of the shoulder, looking at him. Yeah. You have to look up his Let's Plays are on the Let's Play archive, not on YouTube, because they're red. They're red, they're read out loud. They're read on. You have to read them. Fuck, I don't know what I'm saying. Leon rolled and was on top of him. Blah 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 blah. Tumor-like eye. It was looking at him, and he jammed the barrel of his weapon against his drooling chin and pulled the trigger, screaming, emptying the heavy rounds into its thrashing head. The beast shrieking, flailing. The beast shrieked, flailing, falling sideways off Leon. In a flash, he was up and running, straight for the open elevator. The enormous freakish animal was still howling as Leon sprinted to the lift, and turned, hating the control marked down, and saw the beast shuddering, changing, screaming, and spitting chunks of bone and flesh and blood as it also turned and stared for the elevator. It picked up speed with each staggering step, the door closing slowly, the terrible creature almost flying now, and Leon had a shotgun in his hands, pumped a shot, and squeezed. The blast hit its barreled chest, knocking it back, and the door closed. Leon was going down, and there was only 1 minute left. I'm not a fan of like the setting of the original Nier is interesting to me, but the gameplay looks just unpleasant overall. That and like this like the aesthetic, there's something about the way it's rendered that doesn't look right. So I'm probably not gonna play the original Nier, even though I know it's a good game. Well, we're almost there. What's the last page in this? We have 338. We are 28 pages from the end, guys. Getting there. We're getting there. Chapter 30. Bam! Sherry felt the train rock violently all around her. Claire! She ran to the door, remembering that Claire had said not to leave and not carry. She didn't know what it was or what she could do to help, but she couldn't just stand there. Bam! And the car shifted again, another loud banging crash blasting through the stale air, the floor trembling beneath her feet. Sherry reached the door and hit the open switch, her heart hammering, sweat dribbling through the dirt on her face. The door slid open, and there was Claire, pointing her gun at something Sherry couldn't see, something at the back of the car. Claire's gaze flickered to her, and she shouted words, and her shouted words quaked with fear and panic. "Don't come out! Shut the door!" Sherry reached out for the controls and hesitated, terrified for Claire, wanting to see what it was. Quick look, and she darted her head out. Just for a second, searching for the source of Claire's fear, for whatever was slamming into the train car. A smell like chemicals and burnt metal had filled the dimly lit platform, coming from... Sherry screamed when she saw it, when she saw the tattered, charred monster that was rocking the subway just past the wall of metal bars. She saw its giant fist pound the steel wall of the train, but it was the monster's face that she couldn't look away from. Mr. X! The skin was burned away from his face, from the whole body. Smoke drifted up from the blackened mellowed lump of his skull, but there were eyes still alive, red and black and streaming with acrid smoke, but still very much alive. Sherry, do it now! Claire screamed, not taking her gaze from the smoking monster, from its terrible giant body coated with red metallic muscle, as red and burnt as its awful eyes. Sherry hit the controls and the door closed as Claire started to fire. The elevator did go down, though not as Leon had expected, and not nearly as fast as he needed it to go. The wide platform stripped down at an angle tunnel like a slide, neon gridwork on black walls humming past slowly. Now 45 seconds to reach minimum safe distance. It's Sherry with an SH blade charge. SHERRY. Go, go, go! Leon breathed, every ache and pain in his body forgotten in the rising dread that beat his brain. The voice had stopped telling him to report to the bottom platform, now only making announcements in 10-second increments. As much as he loathed the repeated instructions, it was much worse not hearing them. The silences between the statements were telling him not to bother trying. To make it this far and die because of a slow elevator. He couldn't accept that. He'd been through too much. The car crashed. Claire, the running and the monsters, and Ada and Birkin. He had to make it, or it was all for nothing. There didn't seem to be a real floor beneath the descending platform, or he would have tried it on foot, but the lift seemed to be lowering by grooves cut into either side of the darkness, by some mechanism that he couldn't begin to guess at. 20 seconds to reach. Leon started to shake, the tension running through his muscles, tightening them, making it hard to breathe. What was safe distance? When that cool, inhuman voice reached zero, how long would they have before the explosion? Full throttle, she said, full throttle. The train would have to be fast. And he had 10 seconds left to get to it, as the strange elevator continued its smooth, unhurried trek down into the dark. A video about RE2? Probably not. A lot of people have already been covering that stuff head to toe. I might do a Resident Evil series on what could have been better in the other games. The history development of Resident Evil 5 is particularly interesting because there was a lot of changes early on that were not represented in the final build. The door slid shut, and Sherry was safe. For the moment. Claire's thoughts had kicked into overdrive, spinning through her limited options in a flash. Can't let him knock it off the tracks. She knew she couldn't hope to injure the creature, but she might be able to distract it long enough for them to get away. She wished she'd bothered to show Sherry that simple control for the trains, wished that the train was already moving, taking Sherry to safety. But I didn't, and we have to go now. The T-103 was the final boss for one of the campaigns. The recorded message was continuing down to the final 10 seconds to reach the safe distance. As the smoking remains of Mr. X dealt another hammering blow to the dented subway wall, Claire aimed for its mutant head and fired. 5 shots, 4 of them smacking into the bizarre material that made up its flesh, about where the human's ear would be. The 5th went wide, and as the explosive thunder echoed through the shadows of the chilled platform, the thing that she dubbed Mr. X turned slowly towards her. Now what? The recorded female voice distracted her for a split second as Mr. X took a single step towards her, a lumbering, monstrous step that pulled it out of the shadows. 3, 2, 1. Safe distance minimum now required. Self-destruct will occur in 5 minutes. There are now 5 minutes until detonation. The alarm still blared, but at least the voice had shut up. She wouldn't have noticed in any case. Her eyes wide, gaze fixed on the creature. It was hideous, and all the more so for its still humanoid shape, like a mockery of reality, of sanity. In spite of the charred smoking patches that covered most of its body, its unnatural flesh hadn't lost its elasticity. The reddish matter beneath the burns flexed and contracted like real muscle. It looked like a skinned giant that had crawled from beneath a burning building. And if it had suffered from its molten metal bath, she couldn't see it. Another mighty step, and the arms rose. The barred gate that was ripped down. The iron bars were crashing into the concrete. Slow. At least there's still that. It was the only thing she had going for her. Claire sprinted for the subway door, still afraid, but the smoking monster was slow, powerful, but unable to really move. And suddenly Mr. X wasn't just walking anymore. The creature bent at its waist, bent its knees, and pushed off the ground in a dynamic lunge that tore gouges in the concrete, its deformed feet propelling it forward towards her at full run. Claire didn't think. She dodged right and took off past the hunched loping monster, running as fast as she could. It almost got her anyway. Its reflexes faster than fast, as if losing its facade of skin had freed it somehow. The liquid metal paring it down to its core strength. As she leapt over the broken gate and into the shadows, she heard the screeches of not flesh fingers raking across the cement, so that Mr. X had brought one mighty arm up, slashing through the air where she'd only been seconds before. It meant to disembowel her. But why no G-Virus? No reason. Claire ran deeper into the echoing darkness as the intercom system calmly informed her that they had 4 minutes left. In the original, the remake, William Birkin kills the 103 in Claire's story. So there's precedent for that in canon now, not just in the manga. I've told them, Ash, I'm having writer's block on it. There's a lot to cover with it. So it's taking a little bit longer. I've only gotten through, I have it all hashed out bullet point wise, but the actual wording of things and the fine detailing are really the hard parts. So I'm only on episode 7 of 20, though a lot of it has been bullet pointed out. So hopefully it shouldn't take too long, but I am still struggling with it. There's also I have to get ready for Japan too. There are now 4 minutes until detonation. Shit! Just when he thought he might have a stroke from the frustration, the elevator had finally stopped. Leon jerked at the handle to a thick metal door, tensing himself to run. And the door opened into one wall of a passage, a sterile concrete corridor lit by flickering overhead bars, and there were no signs telling him which way to go. Left or right? A few seconds as he hesitated could cost him his life. if he still had any chance at all. He heard once that when faced with a choice, most people instinctively turn to the direction of their dominant hand. With the crappy luck he'd had throughout his long, long night in Raccoon, he decided to go the other way. Left. Leon ran, his boots pounding the floor, wondering if he should even bother. Not far from the broken gate, Claire saw a walkway that crossed over the train. The stairway is hidden by a deep shadow. And she heard the pounding of Mr. X behind as it started after her, each running step as a violent slap of mutant flesh against the cement. The terror drove her on, her feet hardly touching the ground, not caring if she ran head onto the wall in the deepening dark. Maybe that would be best. It was tremendously powerful. It was fast. It was impossible to kill. She didn't stand a chance if it caught her. And the steps were getting louder, faster, and she heard the ripping scrapes of its clawed fingers plowing up concrete. She had maybe a second before that hand tore into her, and she dodged right again, throwing herself into a well of darkness just past the stairs. Mr. X flew past her, a mammoth, hulking blur, and she actually felt the wind from its moving hand whisper against her leg as she hit the cold floor. I will be streaming from Japan, actually, so don't worry, you'll get to look forward to that. I don't know how often it will be, but I will try to be streaming from Japan as frequently as possible. Sharp pain shot up her arm, her elbow cracking hard against the cement. She ignored it, jumping to her feet, searching for the monster in the dark. Can it see? Does it see me? Her hand found an angled wall to the right, cement against her back on the left. She was in the space beneath the stairs, and she had no idea where the impossibly silent X was. The shadows wouldn't help her if it could see in the dark. She ran her hand over the walls, found a switch, and punched it. The texture of shadow changed as dim light filtered down from above, and she saw the monster less than 50 feet away just as it turned, its thick red gaze scanning evenly across the deserted platform, and finding her. Volume? What's wrong with volume? What happened with volume? Is everything alright, guys? Oh, you were correcting what you said. Gave me a heart attack there, Blade Charge. You gotta be careful with that. I'll get to my Japan stuff in just a bit, because I'll cover a bit at the end of this. Because we'll have time, trust me. We haven't even been here an hour, and I'm almost done with this book. I mean, come on. The only sound was a soft crackling coming from its still smoking flesh, until it took a step for the stairwell and cement crunched beneath one leg. 6 or 7 shots left. Get the eyes. Claire stepped quickly out of the shadows and raised Iron's gun, squeezing the trigger, backing towards the stairs. Bam! 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 And X was positioning itself for another attack, the bullet smashing into its melted face, 2 of them ricocheting from the matter of its skull as it aligned to her position. Bam! Bam! She was at the stairs, sliding up a step, the rounds useless. Mr. X staring at its lurching run. It would be on her before she could turn. Before she could get up the steps. I'll die. But at least I'll hurt it first. Mr. X took 2 powerful strides, having the distance between them as Claire aimed, determined to make the last shots count. She would die, and her only regret was for Sherry, her only wish that she would be able to incapacitate the Nightmare X before it killed her. She fired, and the monster's left eye exploded. A burst of inky fluid splattered the wretched inhuman face. Yes! Mr. X veered to its right, not stopping, but not coming straight at her anymore. It would still hit the base of the stairs. Too close. She had to try for the other eye. And she had about 2 seconds left. Claire aimed, found her mark, and click. There were no bullets left, and the monster was slamming into the base of the steps, the smell of roasted meat washing over her as it raised its giant hand up. Its giant, terrible, bloody hand was all she could see. Claire rolled down the concrete stairs, hunched herself into a ball, and screamed as Mr. X's ragged clawed fingers raked across her left thigh. A distant voice told her that they had 3 minutes left. He'd gone the wrong way. Twists and turns in the cold and empty hall had led him to a storage room, a dead end. There are now 3 minutes until detonation. Leon turned back the way he'd come, and with what felt like a very last of his strength, forced himself into a stumbling run. He was too exhausted to feel disappointed, to worry about his impending death, to wish that things were different. It took all of his energy just to keep moving. He'd make it, or he wouldn't. Either way, he didn't think he'd be surprised. Claire hit the floor at the base of the stairs and leapt to her feet, blood running down her leg in a hot pulse of stinging pain. She staggered away, nothing broken, but she knew her clawed leg was just beginning of what it would do to her, a prelude to the real pain. Mr. X was still bent over the railing of the steps, but as she stumbled away, back towards the broken gate of the platform, the monster pushed itself off. It turned its immense body in her direction, the open blackness of its empty eye socket drooling out some dark and ichorous liquid. It would compensate for its altered sense, she was sure. It would compensate, realign, run at her again, and it would slaughter her like the merciless machine it was. There was nothing she could do to stop it. At least I'll die in the explosion. Claire tripped on the metal bars of the gate, barely catching herself, blood pattering to the ground as she staggered another step. Please let it be quick. Here! Use this! Claire spun and saw that Mr. X was positioning itself for the killing strike, and saw a silhouette high above on the walkway over the train. A woman's voice, a woman's shape, the shadowed figure throwing something. Who? That clattered across the concrete, lining between her and Mr. X. It was the metal, it was silver. She'd seen them in movies, but it was a machine gun, and Claire ran for it. Another final hope, another chance, however slim, that she and Sherry would survive. She reached the weapon, dropped, saw X pushing itself towards her, the thundering of its steps shaking the ground, and she scooped up the heavy gun, kicking up against the floor and rolling onto her back, her shaking hand finding the trigger, her body moving to accommodate the weapon. Stock on the ground, arms twisted around the cold metal, aiming. Please, please! The monster was only a step away when the spray of bullets crashed out of the gun, a clattering, rattling string of tiny explosions that shook Claire's entire body and whammed into the gut of the beast, the sheer force of so many rounds stopping it in mid-stride and pushing it back. She felt the vibrating metal trying to shake itself free of her grip, so she held it tighter, the butt of the weapon tapping against the floor at a manic pace. The bullets were still pounding into the creature's abdomen, so fast and so many that she couldn't hear her own gaping cries of fury and pain and exhilaration. Or exaltation. And Mr. X was trying to move forward, but a strange thing was happening, a strange and beautiful thing. Its gut was being shredded by the endless streams of rounds, its midsection gaining depth and texture, black fluids coursing down its lower half from the ragged, growing wound. Mr. X's mouth was open, an empty hole like its eye socket, and like the socket, thick liquid was pouring out, obscuring its pitiless face. Claire held on, directing the hail, watching the creature try to stand against the pulsating, crashing spray, watching it bleed, watching as it seemed to condense its massive body crumpling its torso sinking down. The bullets still flying, Mr. X raised its arms and split in two. I didn't catch the Fates. I've not seen Heaven's Feel at all. I've only seen 2 Fate shows. Claire took her finger off the trigger as X's upper body toppled to the cement, a wet slap of heavy meat, and its legs collapsed, falling to one side, more strange blood gushing from its both halves. Pools of shiny black grew around the massive pieces of broken body, forming stinking puddles. The creature was dead, and even if it wasn't, it didn't matter anymore. Unless it could pull itself across the floor as fast as she could run, her battle with the terrible mystery that had been Mr. X was finally through. Hell with that! No time! Move! Claire was on her feet in a second, ignoring the squelching blood in her boots and the pain that had caused it, her gaze searching the upper platform for her unknown savior. No one was there, and she didn't know if another minute had ticked by, the warning lost in the gunfire. Hey! Claire shouted, backing towards the subway. We have to go now! No answer, no sound, but the ringing in her ears that echoed of her trembling words. If she wanted to save Sherry, Claire turned and ran. 2 minutes until... Leon pushed himself to go faster, the twining tunnel a blur of gray that spun past his aching, breathless perception. He lost all track of the turns and twists in the corridor, and was rapidly losing hope, a voice in the back of his mind telling him that maybe it would just be best to stop, sit, and rest. And then he heard it. That tiny, despairing whisper was obliterated by the sound of heavy machinery stirring to life, somewhere up ahead, not far ahead. Train! Faster, legs distant, rubbery, lungs working, heart pounding one way or another, it was almost over. I blow my nose. Fate is an interesting premise, but ultimately not one that I find ultimately interesting enough to stomach some of the horrendous writing that goes behind it. Alright, here we are, guys. Final chapter before the epilogue, 32. Claire burst into the train, holding a giant rifle with one leg covered in blood, barely pausing to hit the controls of the door before running for the engineer's booth. Sherry knew they were in trouble, that it was going to be close, so she didn't waste time asking questions. She followed, relieved beyond measure that Claire was okay, but keeping it to herself. Okay, she's okay, and we're going now. A small, tinny version of the intercom voice and alarms blared into the tiny room's control board. There are 2 minutes until detonation. Claire dropped the oddly shaped rifle and was hitting buttons, throwing switches, and her attention fixed to on the console. A giant mechanical hum suddenly enveloped them, a growing, whining rumble that made Claire grit her teeth. Sherry couldn't tell if it was a smile, but she smiled and she felt the train lurch and start to move, taking them away from the platform. Claire turned and saw Sherry standing behind her and smiled to her. Claire rested one hand on Sherry's shoulder but didn't say anything, so Sherry didn't either, waiting to see what would happen. The train started to go faster, sliding past dimly lit halls and platforms. The tunnel in front of them dark and empty. Sherry let the warmth of Claire's hand remind her that they were friends, that whatever happened, Claire was her friend. And she saw a policeman, stumble into view ahead of on the left, and then the train was gliding past him, his eyes wide, searching desperate in his dirty face. Claire! Claire! It was Sherry that said Claire, not Leon. I almost said a Leon voice there. What part of Fate's writing is horrendous? Well, let's talk about how bodily fluids replace magical mana, and that means every little part of a bodily fluid. Let's start there and go from that, because that's just an excuse for a lot of things. Claire turned and ran for the out of the booth, her footsteps clattering through the metal train car, sprinting to the door. She hit the control, and the door slid open, the booming, grinding sound of the subway billowing into the closed space. Leon! She screamed. Hurry! She jerked back suddenly, a wall sliding by, and spun around, looking as desperate as the man, Leon, had. Another second, she turned back and closed the door. Did he make it? Sherry asked, realizing that Claire couldn't possibly know, even as the words came out of her mouth. Claire came to her and put an arm around her. As the train kept going faster, her face nodded with worry, and the voice in her intercom told them they had 1 minute left. And the door in the back of the car opened. In stumbled Leon, his arms wrapped and shredded, and with a shredded, stained bandage. His hair matted with dark, dry goo. His eyes bright and blue in the mask of the dirt. Full throttle! Full throttle! He shouted. Claire nodded, and Leon blew out a heavy breath. He staggered towards them, the train shifting back and forth, speeding now, rocketing through the tunnel. He put his arm around Claire, and Claire hugged him tightly. Ada? Claire whispered. And the scientist? Leon shook his head, and Sherry saw that he might cry. Leon shook his head, and Sherry saw that he might cry. No, I didn't. No. 30 seconds until detonation. 29, 28. The one's voice kept counting down, the numbers seeming to come twice as fast as they should, and Sherry buried her face in Claire's warm side, thinking about her mom. Mom and Dad. She hoped that they had gotten out, that they were safe somewhere. But they're probably not. They're probably dead. Sherry could hear Claire's heart pounding, and she hugged her friend tighter, thinking that she would think about it later. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sequence complete. Detonation. For a second, there was no sound at all. The alarms had finally stopped, and the clattering movement of the racing train was all there was to hear. And then there was an explosion. A muffled sound, a shroomp sound that kept growing, becoming huge. Sherry closed her eyes, and the train rocketed suddenly, horribly, and they were all thrown to the middle floor as bright burning light flickered through the window. As the sound of the car crash blasted all around them, heavy thumps rang over the roof, and the train kept going. It kept going, and the light went away, and they weren't dead. Kaboom! Yeah, like that. Exactly like that. Made that exact sound. The blinding flash dissipated and faded, and Leon felt the tension leak out of his body. He rolled onto his side and saw Claire sitting up, reaching for the hand of the young girl next to her. Okay? Claire asked the girl, and the child nodded. Both of them turned to him, their faces expressing what he felt. Shock, exhaustion, disbelief, hope. Leon Kennedy? This is Sherry Birkin, Claire said, saying the words carefully, the slightest accent on Birkin. He got the message, even without the intensity of her gaze, nodding his understanding before smiling at the girl. Sherry, this is Leon, Claire continued. I met him when I had just gotten to Raccoon. Sherry turned with a smile, a weary, too adult smile that seemed out of place. She was too young to smile like that. One more rotten deed to lay at Umbrella's door. Innocence stolen from a child. For a few seconds, they just sat there on the floor, staring at one... Actually, I had one... Nah, I won't do that. Floor, staring at one another, smiles fading all around. Leon hardly dared to hope that it was really over, that they were leaving this terror behind. Again, he saw his feelings mirrored in front of him, in Sherry's worried brow and Claire's tired gaze. And when he heard the distant squeal of metal coming from somewhere at the back of the train, he didn't see any surprise. A rending, tearing screech, followed by a heavy, somehow stealthy thump, and then nothing. Should have known it isn't over. Zombie? Sherry whispered, the words almost lost in the gently clattering sound of the speeding train. I don't know, sweetie, Claire said softly, and for the first time Leon noticed that her left leg was ripped open. Was ripped to shit, blood oozing from several ragged scratches. He'd been too amazed at their narrow escape to see it before. How about I go take a look, Leon said, taking his cue from Claire, keeping his worried voice mild and even. No point in scaring Sherry any worse. He stood up, nodding towards Claire's leg. Sherry, why don't you sit here with Claire? Keep an eye on that leg. I'll see if I can find some bandages while I'm checking things out. Don't let her move, okay? Sherry nodded, her small face intent with purpose that, again, was too old for her years. Got it. I'll be back in a minute, he said, and turned towards the back of the swaying train, praying that it was nothing at all and knowing better as he reached for the Remington and went to see. Leon opened the door and the sound of the rolling train amplified for a second before it closed behind him. Claire couldn't see him enter the next car from her position on the floor and wished she'd been in shape to go with him. If there was something else on the train, Sherry wasn't safe. None of them were. Don't think like that. It's nothing. It's over. Like it was over with Mr. X? What should I do? Sherry asked, pulling Claire away from the disheartened thoughts. Direct pressure, right? Claire nodded. Yeah, except we're both pretty grimy, and I think it's starting to clot. Let's see if Leon comes back with something clean. She trailed off, her thoughts going back to Mr. X. There was something nagging at her, but she was a little dizzy from the blood she'd lost. G-Virus. It wanted the G-Virus before. Why had Mr. X come to the subway platform? Why had it been trying to get inside the train? Unless... Claire struggled to get up, fighting her swimming head and the throbbing pain in her leg. "Hey, don't move," Sherry said, a look of deep distress in her eyes. "Leon said to stay still." She might have been able to overcome her physical problems, but seeing Sherry on the edge of panic was too much. If there was some G-Virus creature on board, if that was why Mr. X had come, Leon would have to face it alone. She couldn't leave Sherry. If Leon didn't come back, she'd have to figure out how to detach the train car, or stop the train so they could get off before the creature could get to them. Claire shut the thought off, forcing a smile at Sherry. "Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure he got through to the second car." Got through the second car. Claire nodded absently, hoping that she was wrong, hoping that Leon would be back any second. Bam! 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 The thunder of the Remington was loud and clear. Sherry grabbed her hand as 2 more shots blasted, the hope from Claire's fuzzy mind as the train sped through the dark. The second car was clear, the same wide-open space that Leon had entered the train by. All dusty steel and not much else. Whoever had designed the escape vehicle had obviously figured Umbrella employees would have just be packed like sardines. Just us 3, though, and our stowaway. There was nothing to see, but Leon moved slowly nonetheless, carefully scanning the shadowy corners, and steeled himself for whoever it was in the last car. Whatever it was, it couldn't be as bad as the thing that had jumped him in the cargo room. The Birkin thing, if that was what it was. The thought that the creature had anything at all to do with Claire's younger friend was deeply unsettling, even obscene. A monster and a madwoman, both destroyed both parents of the little girl. He reached the back of the dim, rocking train car and peered through the door, pushing all other thoughts aside as he tried to make out anything in the last car. Darkness, and nothing else. Hell. Maybe there wasn't anything to see, but he had to look. He felt his heart start to pound fresh adrenaline through his body, felt his weariness fall away. Nothing. It was surely nothing, but it felt bad. Wrong. Last thing. Very last thing. He took up a deep breath and opened the door, stepping into the loud, whipping breeze of the outside, holding onto the rail. The rattle of the train drowned out the thumping of his heart as he moved to the last car, opening the door and stepping into the darkness. Immediately, he raised the shotgun, all of his senses telling him to run as the door slid shut behind him. He reached back, slapping for a light switch. Darkness, but there was a powerful smell like bleach or chlorine, and there was a soft sound of wetness, of movement. A single bare bulb flicked on in the middle of the car as he found the button, and he thought for just a second that he had lost his mind. A thing. A creature that wasn't even vaguely humanoid, except for a strange pulsating tumor protruding from one side, a thick orb that looked very much like an eye. Birkin. The creature was giant, was a giant stretching blob of dark, slimy matter, spanning the width of the car. Leon couldn't tell how tall it was. The Birkin thing had thick streamers extended out, tentacles of wet and elastic goo attached to every part of the space in front of it, the ceiling, walls, and floor. And as Leon watched, the alien beast pulled itself forward, the dark limbs contracting, bringing the mass of the body a few feet ahead of where it had been. Not crazy. He was seeing it, seeing the brackish moving colors of black and green and purple in its tentacles and, as it stretched out again, the viscous material latching to the metal of the car, somehow dragging the blob a few more feet ahead. The body itself was nothing much so much as a gaping maw, a wet cave that still had teeth. And that would reach him pretty soon if he didn't snap out of his disgusted stupor. Leon aimed into the giant hole of its mouth and pulled the trigger, pumping in another round, firing, pumping, firing, and then the shotgun was empty, and the giant semi-liquid thing was still moving steadily towards forward. He didn't know how to kill it, didn't know if the round had even damaged it. His mind raced for an answer, for a solution that would end the terrible life of the G-Virus monster. He could detach the last car, fire through the pins and chains that held it together, if he could go back to the find the locking mechanism. And it would still be alive, still living and charging in the blackness of the tunnel, becoming something new. The stretching elastic of its nebulous form inched forward, and Leon reached back for the door control. He'd have to try unhooking the cars. There was no other choice, unless... He hesitated, then unholstered his magnum and pointed at the impossible mass. At the strange tumor that peered out of the slit in its rubbery flesh, the eye that had been in every form of Birkin had taken. Careful aim, and... BAM! The effect was immediate and total. The heavy round pierced the roomy sphere, and a hissing scream whined or whistled, pouring out of the tooth maw like nothing on earth, like a howl of something mechanical and insane. The tendrils of uniformed matter shrank inward, turning black and shriveling, and the thing imploded, pulling it on itself, withered into a streaming black mass at less than a quarter of its original size. Like a deflated beach ball, the gelid blob wrinkled and shrank, collapsing into a flattening thickness, drooling itself into a wide puddle of bubbling slime. "Suck on that!" Leon said softly. The last bubble was popping in the pool of dead and inanimate thing. He watched it for a few moments, thinking about nothing at all, and then finally turned to join the others to tell them it was over. "First day on the job," he thought. "I want a raise." Leon said to no one at all, and couldn't help the grin that broke across his face, a tired, sunny grin that faded quickly. But for a few seconds he wore it. Leon felt better than he had in a very long time. Leon was back, and had found a jumpsuit that he tore into pieces and used to bind Claire's leg. Ollie had said that they were safe now, although Sherry had seen him and Claire's exchange a look. One of those "we shouldn't talk about it right now" looks. Sherry was too tired to take offense. She snuggled into Claire's arms, Claire stroking her hair, the three of them not talking. There was nothing to say, or at least nothing for a little while. They were alive on a train thundering through the dark, and from somewhere not far ahead, a soft light came filtering in, coming through the window in the control booth, and Sherry thought it looked very much like morning. Here we are, guys, at the epilogue. They saw the aftermath of the explosion from 10 miles outside the city, a black and billowing cloud that rose up into the sky into the early morning light and hung over Raccoon like a terrible storm. A bad dream, Rebecca thought. A reoccurring one. Umbrella. She didn't say it aloud, because it wasn't necessary. John and David hadn't gone through the Spencer Estate nightmare, but they had been at the Cove facility witness to what Umbrella was capable of. They knew. Nobody spoke as David stepped up the speed, his knuckles white on the wheel. For once, John didn't crack any jokes about what might have happened. They all knew that it was bad. Before Jill, Chris, and Barry had left for Europe, Jill had wired them with her suspicions about another accident, and had asked them to keep tabs. Yeah, this is before Resident Evil 3 came out, so they had to retcon that in the next book. There's retcons all over this novel series. When the phone lines had gone down, they loaded up the SUV and left Ming to see what could be done. The only question was how many people had died this time. Maybe this is the end. Finally, a blast like that, Umbrella can't cover this up so easily. Not if it's as bad as it looks. John finally broke the silence, his deep, mellow voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Failsafe?" David sighed. "Probably. And if there was a spill, we're not going in. We'll circle the city and then call for help from Latham. Umbrella is surely sending in a cleanup staff out already." Rebecca nodded along with John. They weren't technically part of the Stars anymore, but David had been the captain before, and with good reason. They fell back into a tense silence. The dawn touched trees spinning past until the utility vehicle. Rebecca wondering what they would find, such as a plane flying overhead. When she saw the people staggering up to the road, waving their arms. "Hey," she started, but Dave was already hitting the brakes, slowing down as they neared the three, some ragged strangers. A cop with a bandaged arm and a woman in shorts, both of them holding weapons, and a little girl in pink vest that was much too big for her. They weren't infected, or at least not showing any signs that Rebecca could see, but they looked like hell nonetheless. With their ripped clothes and their faces pale and shocked beneath the masks of dirt, they certainly could have passed for the Walking Dead. I'll talk, David said. David's British? Okay. I'll talk, David said, his crisp British accent mild but firm, and when they were pulling up beside the raccoon survivors. David opened the window and killed the engine, the young cop stepping forward as the woman slipped one grimy arm around the little girl's shoulders. There's been an accident in Raccoon, he said, and although they were obviously tired and wounded and badly in need of help, there was a wariness in the cop's tone, a guarded, careful note that suggested that how bad things had been. A terrible accident. You don't want to go there, it's not safe. David frowned. What sort of accident, officer? The young woman spoke, her mouth set in bitter line. An umbrella accident, she said, and the cop nodded. The little blonde girl buried her face against the woman's hip. John and Rebecca exchanged a look, and David hit the switch to unlock the doors. Really? Those seem to be the worst kind, he said gently. We'd be happy to help you. If you'd like, we could call for help. It was a question. The cop glanced back at the woman, then met David's gaze for several long beats. He must have seen something in David's face that he felt he could trust. He nodded slowly, then motioned for the woman and girl to come forward. Thanks, he said, in the exhaustion finally coming through. If you could give us a ride, that'd be great. David smiled. Please, get in. John, Rebecca, would you assist me? Would you assist? John grabbed a couple of blankets out of the back as Rebecca reached for her medical kit, careful not to uncover the rifles tucked next to the wheel well. An umbrella accident. Rebecca wondered if she knew how lucky they were to have survived it, but another look in those three exhausted, shell-shocked faces told her that they probably did. They started talking even before David turned the vehicle around. In a very short time, they discovered that they had a lot in common. As the child fell asleep and they drove back the way they'd come, leaving the burning city behind. And there you have it. Resident Evil, City of the Dead. I certainly hope you guys like this novel, because I love it. I adore this novel. I don't know if it's the best written novel. When it comes down to what kind of writing you like, it's all personal taste. I don't really buy into that, oh, these are the best novels ever written bullshit. There are some really well-written novels that have terrible stories. There are some really, really good stories that have terrible writing. My biggest gripe with this is the fact that she kept calling Clips magazines. Like, what the hell? It's like Gun 101. There's obviously some things that she didn't know about. As for what's going to go on now on my channel, next week, if I have time permitting, I will be live streaming a Let's Play of one of the Resident Evil 2 games, either the 2019 version or the original 1998 version. I don't know which one at this point. I'm still debating that. If you guys have a preference, please comment down below. Tweet me on Twitter. I'd be happy to play one of them. I don't know if it'd be on Wednesday or Friday night that I would stream them, which would be fun. As for the rest of the channel going forward this month, I'm going to be in Japan starting March 30th, going through March 13th. And I'll be visiting places like Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, as well as a number of individual places that are all throughout the interim of Japan. And I will be doing live streams from there. So, with that all said, 1856 version. Oh, really? You guys want the 2019 version? It's very interesting because the 2019 version I very much like, but it condenses things in a certain way that I don't know if it feels right. I read this adaptation of the novel of the series first of the game, and I was hooked on that telling of the story. But the more I've played Resident Evil 2 and gone through the scenarios, Resident Evil 2 is actually better told with the alternate scenario, which is Claire A, Leon B, where Leon is pursued by Mr. X and Claire is instead pursued by William Birkin, and both of them face down different monsters in their campaign. They both face down, Leon faces down primarily Mr. X, Claire faces down primarily Birkin, and just like thematically it makes more sense because there's a lot more intrigue with Sherry, there's a lot more intrigue with Ada. it's interesting. Like there's like twists in there about how Mr. X was after the G virus initially in the first version of the game, but now in the new one, he's just there to kind of get rid of survivors, which I think is kind of a weird choice, but a cool one. I wonder if there is a Godzilla mod for Mr. X. That'd be amazing. But yeah, no, I will not be fighting Godzilla in Japan. I do not plan on that. But you can look forward to my series of vlogs, my live streams about A Scotsman in Japan, which I'm hoping to title it. I'm gonna try and work on the thumbnail for that soon. And overall, I hope you guys had fun with this. This was a lot of fun to read. Obviously, my voice gave out. And the next book I'm planning to do, whenever it is released, is will be RWBY After the Fall. Whenever it's released, expected on June 5th, 2019. So I'm going to make a little reminder for myself to buy it and get it then. Where's June 25th? Add an event. And basically, I'm going to get this and I will live read it to you guys. Because I love you that much. I'm Scotch-Irish. I'm technically more Irish than I am Scottish, but the saying I'm Scottish rolls way easier off the tongue than saying I'm Irish Scot. I kind of like doing these streams solo, though. If there are people that I think I'll have someone in there with me. I won't do it alone like I've done with this. But yes, this is what I would am planning on doing. What the hell is this? Last Words of Summer. Oh, that's something different. Okay. But yes, are there any more questions for me in relation to what's coming up in the next few months? Because basically what's coming up is next week I'll hopefully stream. After that, I'll be in Japan and streaming from there. After I get back from Japan, I'm going to jump completely into producing, fixing RWBY Volume 3. I'm still working through the script. I'm making some headway. It's a bit of a drag. I'm hoping to have a finished draft of the script out to Fatman before I leave so that he can review it while I'm gone. And come up with every single failure point in it. And then basically when I get back, I'm going to go into full production mode. I had planned for April 29th to be a release date. I'm going to push that back to a predicted mid-May, maybe late May, depending on how long it takes to edit, because editing these things takes a long while. Wait, McNeil is an Irish. McNeil's a Scottish name. I get it from my mother's side of the family, and a number of other things related to that. It's a like I said, Renee McNeil is a pseudonym. You guys know this. Yeah, I'm hoping it's going to be good. Making a tournament arc actually work for a larger plot is really hard. So I'm hoping, that's the big thing that's been giving me conniptions. The tournament plot. I hate tournament plots. I hope they never go with another tournament plot ever again. But yes, I'm going to cut it off there for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've had a lovely time. For anyone just now looking at any of my videos, a shout out to every single one of my lovely patrons. If you want to support the channel, you too can support me by patroning and joining the Team Frostbite Discord server, where I, as long as many other members of Team Frostbite, as well as other major members of this community, are very active, very constantly. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you had a good time, and I'll catch you all on the flip side.